And we are recording on Tuesday, March 5th, 2024 at 12:05 p.m. Eastern Time. The new guest, Dr. Scott Jensen, and returning Mr. John Cullen and Mr. Dave Collum. But as I just told them, I do have a sponsor now that's paying for the podcast, and yeah, I think that alone, regardless of what the sponsor is, unless of course it's like illegal weapons trading, it is I think cool enough. I think it doesn't even matter what it is. The fact that I'm banned from iTunes and YouTube and Twitter and Reddit, and probably banned from things I don't even. I'm banned from PayPal. I'm banned from Twitch. I'm banned from platforms I don't even know what they are, and I'm somehow banned. But American Hartford Gold, guys, go use promo code Tommy. I can actually say it's something I use because I don't really trust any other investment, probably because of my own paranoia and not because of any sort of financial wisdom. But I don't really, because you can, as I've found with this podcast, with a flip of a switch, you could just shut things off, be it the truckers in Canada or be it anyone, I don't know, within 100 square miles of January 6th. If they don't like you, they can turn off the ones and zeros that you need to live. So American Hartford Gold, please go use promo code. Oh yeah, and if you go do that, you get. I don't think I can have it, but you get a chance at winning $5,000 of silver. And for comparison, here's 100 ounces of silver. And if you really do need bullion because I don't know the global market collapse, and as we approach World War III or a series of global civil wars, you're also going to need an object to I don't know bludgeon people, as I imagine in a world with no technology, we will revert back to siege cannon, warfare, and castles and warlords. And maybe you're not the smartest guy, but you've got a brick. Go back to caveman era. You got a shiny brick like this. This is, I mean, you're pretty much a wizard. Or you can just beat someone to death with it. So I might have just lost that sponsor by saying you can beat people to death with their product. But I mean, very realistically, gold did just hit an all-time high, and yeah, or maybe you're just paranoid like me. So please go use promo code Tommy. But gentlemen, thank you for sitting with me through that. And today we're going to actually, I'll just hand it over to Mr. Cullen. John, you take it over, buddy.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for being here. It's a real great honor. I met Dr. Scott Jensen for the first time, I guess it was January of 2021, that we did a podcast together. And back then, I shared a bunch of information with Dr. Jensen that was pretty earth-shattering at the time. And then I had the opportunity to meet Dr. Dave Collum from Cornell University, I guess last year for the first time. And we did two podcasts together, me and Scott Jensen and me and Dave Collum. So we've each done two shows together. And of all the people that I've had on my podcasts over the course of the last couple years, you two guys were kind of the two who were the most open-minded and least like your egos aren't really affected by new data. And you were open to seeing this new information more so than anybody else that I've met with. And I've had, Steve Kirsch, I've had all kinds of big shot people on the show. And I wanted to share with you both some new information that really just came out in the last 90 days. And the reason is, well, I shouldn't say the information came out. I became aware of it in the last 90 days. The information's been there for a long time. But I became aware of it in the last 90 days. And it basically changes a big part of what I shared with you guys about the pandemic, right? So there were some basic tenets that are still true, but there are some really pivotal parts here that have changed. And I don't know if you guys get to hear this often from other people in your industry or watching the internet, watching podcasts or whatever, but I was wrong. I got it wrong. All right. And I'm going to show you what I got wrong, how I got it wrong, why I got it wrong, and what it is now that I know that, that was wrong. So then, well, what is it? And so what I want to do, since both of you have that background of, these previous sessions that we've done, Tommy, with your, green light, I want to kind of rocket through some content with you guys to sort of bring the audience up to speed. So there's people watching the show, Tommy, that didn't see the show that I did with Dr. Scott Jensen. They didn't see the show that I did with Dr. Dave Collum. And so they don't know what the hell we're talking about here. So why don't I kind of rocket through this stuff, and I'm going to go like a fire hose. All right. I'm going to go fast and furious. and I'm just going to show a whole bunch of content. And then when I'm done, I'm going to flip it to you guys, to Dave, to Scott, to Tommy, and you guys hit me with questions, challenge these findings. You tell me what you think, if that's okay with you guys. You guys good with that?
Yeah,
All
take it
right.
over.
Sure.
So here we go.
Sure.
So this is, I'm warning you, this is going to be drinking from the fire hose. I'm going to go fast and furious here. All right, so I'm going to share my screen. Let's see. Can you guys see that?
Yes, sir.
All right. So you see some sort of like a map with a bunch of red dots on it?
Mhm.
Yes, sir.
All right. So it sounds like we're in operation here. So the net of this is, for those of you who are following me, don't follow me. I'm on Twitter at I_M_John.
John, do you want to finish or do you want interruptions?
You can interrupt right now. You do it.
Okay, I just want to know. I recently did one, and I realized that the saving questions to the very end is not always optimal. So if you don't mind interruptions,
No, but
then
I am going to go fast. All right. So,
okay.
and I'm going fast on purpose because I don't want to bore you, because you guys know a lot of this stuff. So that's why I'm going to rocket through it. It's mostly for the audience to catch up. So this is the map from Johns Hopkins. And the map from Johns Hopkins on March 13th, 2020, it's the lower left-hand corner. I take a screenshot of it. And this is the system that my team at Oracle built with ESRI. So ESRI brings us in and said, hey, we want to marry our mapping capabilities with data. And this is the end result. This is the system that came out of it. So when I took a look at this thing, I said, why is it all red? Where's all the yellow countries? Where's all the green countries? In particular, since there's not 10 people dead in Hong Kong, there's not 10 dead in Shanghai, there's nobody dead in Vietnam. Why is everything red? And I couldn't understand it. And this was March 13th of 2020. And so this is what tipped me off that there was some sort of a cover-up. But the reason for this session is that I was wrong. And what I want to share with you guys is, what was I wrong about? And how did I figure out that I was wrong? So Dave knows I like to do this thing called bottom line up front. What's the net? The bottom line is, there were two pandemics. There was a blue pandemic and a green pandemic. And for sake of brevity, I came up with sort of a slogan that Dr. Fauci couldn't hide the blue pandemic without the green pandemic. All right, so the green pandemic sort of shows up out of nowhere, and like Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, dances with the blue pandemic, except in the valleys. Down in the valleys, the blue pandemic seems to eclipse the green pandemic, but nobody seems to notice that there's two things going on. The blue is P&I deaths in America, so that's pneumonia and influenza deaths, and the green is all deaths with COVID, including George Floyd. Okay, right? You guys with me? All deaths with COVID, 1.2 million. 30,000 people died in Bangladesh. 1.2 million, we're told, died in America. So the mea culpa is, for 3.5 years, I thought it was 1918, reconstructed H1N1. And the reasons I thought that were hypoxia, cyanosis, ground glass opacity, right? Blue lips, altitude sickness. This was the presentation. And I'm saying, my God, that's what they used to call the Blue Death. So in 1918, that's what they were calling the H1N1 outbreak, was the Blue Death. People's lips were turning blue from hypoxia. And later, they went on autopsy, when they looked at the lungs were turned into like jelly, like mush. And it was causing cytokine storms. And I said, my God, I mean, come on, this is a full house. We got the whole thing. So it seemed like that's what it was. And recently, new evidence came out that it's not what it was. All right, so what is that? Well, the new evidence is there was another pandemic. And the other pandemic started long before COVID. And it started in China in 2013. And the Department of Defense was already engaged in 2014. Novartis already had a vaccine in 2013. And I'm going to walk you through this because it turns out that this blue pandemic was bad. And it was not H1N1 1918. It was something else. Now, how did I, drop one hypothesis for the other, right? The whole point of having a straw man hypothesis is you've got a straw man, right? That's the whole point of it. So the H1N1 was a straw man hypothesis. In fact, Dave, when you and I were together, I said to you, if it's not that virus, it's going to be some cockamamie thing that Kawaoka cooked up, like an H14N8 or something like that. It's going to be something from Kawaoka that's, off the reservation. Voila. H7N9 avian influenza. And we've got the Department of Defense. The hell are you calling the Pentagon for a respiratory infection? We need mortars. We need AMRAAMs. Why are you calling the Pentagon? Seems a little over the top for a respiratory infection. All right, so 3 new things came to light, came across my desk. These 3 new things changed everything. The first thing, January 10th of 2020 is when the first person died. I don't know if everybody knows that. January 10th of 2020, the first person dies from COVID in China. Number 2, Trump signs the Moderna deal January 13th of 2020. Huh? Let me go back. January 10th of 2020, the first person died. 3 days later, Trump signs the Moderna deal. How many people are dead, Tommy?
1.
1. Thank you very much. Thank you. So we've got 1 guy dead. Trump signs the Moderna deal. Then what comes across my desk, somebody shares this with me on Twitter. Donald Trump keeps talking about the 1917 Spanish flu. I was like, what the hell is he talking about? It's 1918 Spanish flu, 1918, right? Reconstructed pandemic, H1N1. No, somebody puts together a compilation that we're going to take a look at in a minute or two of him going on and on and on about the 1917 Spanish flu. What the hell was he talking about? He doesn't say it once. It's not like it's a slip up at something and then somebody says, no, Mr. President, it's 1918. He says, oh, okay. No, he says it repeatedly. We're going to take a look at that in a minute because it's meaningful. So back to the map. When we look at the map, March 15th of 2020, there's not 4,000 people dead in China.
So let me ask you a quick question.
Do it.
I read John Barry's book, which I highly recommend. I read it back in 2005, so I barely remember the details. But could 2017 be the date it first showed up? I think it was in Kansas. Could that be the origin of his 17 date?
Of which 17 date are we referring to?
Well, they call it the 1918 flu, but it first showed up. It's either Kansas or Missouri where they actually think it started. Could that have been in 17?
So it turns out that there's 2 distinct strains, and I'm going to show you this. This is kind of the aha moment. And you're like, wait a second, what do you mean there's 2 distinct strains? So it's not that it's the H1N1 a year earlier, which was originally we thought that for about a week. And then we found new evidence and we're like, oh my God, when you see this, Dave, you're going to fall out of your chair, especially because you've studied genetics, right? You've got your master's in genetics. You're going to flip when you see this. So let me go back to the map for a second. The whole point of the map is it's deception, meaning there's not that many people dead and the whole map is red. And this just didn't make any sense to me. And then when I looked at the data, so one night, Laura Ingraham at Fox was able to get this up on the screen. They never did it again. That shows New York with 8,600 people dead and Shanghai was 7. Now, from an Asperger's perspective, meaning with no emotion, I look at that and say, that's not the same virus. The virus in New York and the virus in Shanghai The virus in Shanghai had a running start. The virus in Beijing had a running start. It started in Wuhan. Why would there be 8,000 people dead in New York if there aren't 4,000 dead in all of China? Because it's not the same virus. You're just being told it's the same virus. You're just being told it's the same virus, but it's obviously a little bit different, right? So 8,600 versus 8 or 7, right? This is a significant difference. Nobody seems to notice that. What I lock into are the 4,000 people dying a week in January, February, March of 2020. 4,000 people were dying a week. That's the blue. And all of a sudden, COVID shows up out of nowhere. Like, where the hell did this come from? And all the deaths now are attributed to COVID. But the blue stuff doesn't just disappear, because the data that I'm tracking is coming from coroners and medical examiners. It's not coming from, so medical, that's where we're getting the data. Now, one of the reasons I became semi-famous is I documented, and I shared this with both of you guys when you first came on the show, was I documented this global eradication, quote unquote, of influenza, and that it disappeared from over 100 countries by April 15th of 2020. And at first it seems like, well, this has to be subterfuge. I mean, how the hell, come on. How do you make influenza disappear from 100 countries? And I figured it out, and it's not subterfuge. How weird is that? This happened organically, and now I can explain it. And nobody else even noticed it. And those who have noticed, remember, I published this in October of 2020. So people like Jordan Schachtel and Dr. Ely David and all these other guys, these are the also-rans who are trying to explain it by hand washing and mask wearing because of fomites, which is ridiculous. It disappeared in 100 countries at the same time, right? And that's absurd. And that's why I wrote the white paper. I wrote the white paper as a Queen's Gambit because it's absurd. The notion that it disappears all at once from everywhere is kind of absurd unless somebody had an explanation. The New York Times picks it up, but they don't point out that this happens in 100 countries simultaneously. This is a domestic story. This is about it disappears in the United States. They don't mention France and Uruguay and Chile. I do, right? I pointed out in all these different countries. How the hell does that happen? Well, over 100 countries. Remember, Dave, you said you did it because you had to do it so that you could say it, right? So over 100 countries, it disappears. And at the same time, there's 3 million people with influenza in Italy in January of 2020. And then it just disappears for 2 years? How does that happen? Those are the COVID deaths. Those are influenza specimens. COVID deaths in gray. This is Italy. Influenza specimens. COVID deaths in gray. All right, so here comes the next leg of the stool. Ivanka Trump sends out a tweet in November of 2020 after the election and says the Moderna vaccine is literally the one that Dad partnered with Moderna to create on January 13th of 2020. I repeat, January 13th, 2020. Be happy. This is great news for America. Anybody see the word COVID in there? Anybody see the word SARS-CoV-2 in there? I don't. January 13th. Tommy, how many people were dead from SARS-CoV-2 on January 13th? One. Mike Pence, on the same exact day, sends out a tweet saying on January 13th, 2020, Moderna partnered with President Donald Trump and the NIH to develop a vaccine for the American people. Today, Moderna announced their vaccine is 95% effective. Operation Warp Speed is a success. Anybody see the word COVID? Anybody see the word SARS-CoV-2 in that tweet? How many people were dead on January 13th, Tommy?
1.
What the hell are we buying vaccines if there's one man dead on Earth? There's 41 cases on January 10th. I'm going to play a video for you guys. How do I stop this share And I'm going to share, this is the guy at the WHO telling you how many people died on what day. So let's listen to the details. What you're listening for is, when did we hear the first guy died, and when did we get the sequence? Okay, that's what we're listening for now. So this is from the World Health Organization.
On January 9, Chinese authorities made a preliminary determination of a new coronavirus identified in a hospitalized person with pneumonia in Wuhan. 2 days later, Chinese authorities issued additional information, updating case numbers to 41 from initially 59, and reporting 1 death. Chinese authorities also shared the complete genomic sequence with WHO and with the public.
One guy's dead. There's 41 cases on Earth. And we're buying vaccines? Dr. Jensen. A little uncomfortable, isn't it? A little bit weird. I'm not done. I just want to make sure you got this in your pipe and you smoke it, because this is pretty serious stuff here. Both Mike Pence and Ivanka Trump are telling us that on January 13th, when there's 1 man dead on Earth, we signed a deal for vaccines with Moderna? 1 guy's dead. In fact, it's 1 guy dead on Earth, and by January 20th, right, there's still just a handful of people dead. By January 14th, we're still not sure if it's contagious. So why are we buying vaccines on the 13th before we know if it's contagious and there's 1 guy dead? This is a common sense problem. The second guy dies on January 15th. So now we've got 2 people dead, but the Moderna deal's already signed, according to Mike Pence. And on January 20th, we now have 3 people dead. So we're now 3 weeks into the new year. The problem is that 3 weeks into 2020, we've got 13,100 dead from P&I in the United States since New Year's Day. Since New Year's Day. All right, so in the same 20-something day period, we've got 3 dead from COVID in China. We've got 13,000 dead from P&I in the United States. And the president just signed a contract with Moderna on January 13th. 1 guy's dead. All right. Now we got 9 people dead. This is January 25th. We've got 9 people dead. So what's weird is when Peter Daszak notified ProMed in Cambridge that there was something to keep an eye on in Wuhan, nobody was dead. No one was dead. I don't know what was so weird about this pneumonia. Was it hemorrhagic? Was blood coming out of their eyeballs? Why was he so worried about this pneumonia versus any other pneumonia? And this is where we get to the president ranting and raving about 1917 Spanish flu, because this kind of solves the problem. This kind of solves...
Daszak's emails are September. September of 2020. I just want to...
So that
one.
All right, so the first tweet is him responding to, let's read it together. WeChat is how EcoHealth New York City was able to find out about COVID-19 during 2019. And
there we go. Okay.
December 30th, and get the message out to ProMed. And the guy he gets the message to at ProMed is a guy named Larry Madoff. And Larry Madoff at ProMed was also the medical editor at The Atlantic, working for Laurene Powell Jobs. And they are the guys who sponsor the COVID tracking project that shut down 90 days after Joe Biden was inaugurated. So Peter Daszak notifies ProMed December 30th of 2019. There's nobody dead on that day. Nobody's dead. So now let me share with you guys what Donald Trump was carrying on about, because it seems crazy until you listen to it. And once you listen to it, you won't be able to unhear this. So this is pivotally, this is key. Let's listen to this together.
Read about 1917. But in 1917, certainly not since 1917. There's been nothing like this since 1917. Who would have thought 1917. That was the Spanish flu. 1917. There's been nothing like this since probably 1917. Not since 1917 has there been anything like this. Like nobody's seen since 1917.
They point to 1917, 1918.
It was 1917, 1918. That's a long time ago. 1917, they went through something that was similar. 1917 was the last time. If you go back over 100 years, 1917. You all know what happened in 1917. That's over 100 years ago. You look at 1917, the pandemic, it was something. The worst pandemic since 1917. 1917, that's something. 1917 was a time. In 1917, it was vicious. Everybody that writes a book about the Spanish flu, 1917.
You know, the big one was 1917.
You read about him. You read about him from 1917. A virus, the likes of which this world has not seen since 1917.
I don't think he's talking about 1918 H1N1. I think he's talking about something else. And so when that was brought to my attention, I was like, well, what was going on in 1917? Was 1917 different from 1918? And why does that matter? Well, it turns out in 1917, there was a different virus. And that virus was an avian influenza. And a tweet is shared on Twitter from one of the scientists that says, you know, it's weird. We got H7N9 out here and H9N2 and in the same people that had COVID. The same patients in Wuhan that we tested positive for SARS-CoV-2 also were infected with influenza. And the green, every line you see here in green, yeah, that's H7N9 avian flu.
You're not sharing your screen.
Oh, I apologize. Hang on. My fault. Here we go. See, Tommy, that's you remembering that you're the host. See, that was awesome.
I got it.
You see, that was awesome. All right, so all the stuff you guys see here in green, that's H7N9, and that is an avian influenza. Now, this is the same patient that they said, okay, they've got SARS-CoV-2. Okay, they got SARS-CoV-2 and they've got H7N9. They're co-infected. They have two viruses. And when they did a metagenomic test, they found that 8% was influenza, 2% was SARS-CoV-2. All the stuff out to the right is, the 0.02, 0.03 type stuff. All the various different viruses that are just kind of living in you. But influenza A virus was 8%. SARS was 2%. And because I'm a layperson, I thought 8 is bigger than 2. Where does this take us? It takes us to the worst avian influenza outbreak in human history. What the hell is going on? In Europe? In the United States? In Japan? Oh my God, what the hell is going on? Oh, I didn't get this from the WHO. I got this from the Food and Agriculture Organization at the United Nations. It's a sister organization that Dr. Tedros has nothing to do with. And guess what they told us? They said there's an outbreak of avian influenza in the food supply in China. And it started in 2013, and it got worse and worse and worse, and it's in the food supply. Meaning it's in the chickens and it's in the eggs. And this starts in 2013 in China. Avian influenza, H7N9. March of 2013, China notifies the WHO, and lo and behold, the same type of virus from 1917 is spreading through China. How often did you guys hear Donald Trump refer to it as COVID or SARS-CoV-2 versus the China virus? The China virus starts in 2013, and it's in the poultry. on 2019, Secretary Azar is running HHS, and a guy named Bob Kadlik is the ASPR. He's the Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response. They put together an exercise called Crimson Contagion in 2019, and it concludes, so to speak, in October of 2019, right before Event 201, where they start talking about a different type of virus altogether. So this exercise goes from January to August, so to speak. And guess what the exercise is all about? 8, 7, and 9 outbreak in China. But there is an H7N9 outbreak in China. And what that means is this is not a simulation. This is not like Event 201. This is a live exercise. And that's what Mike Pence meant, what Mike Pompeo meant when he said, we're in a live exercise here. Crimson Contagion was real. This isn't a simulation. H7N9 is spreading across China, and it has become highly pathogenic. This was received under FOIA. They did an exercise. They did do simulation type stuff in the United States, but they were also trying to figure out how the hell are we going to cover this up? We're not going to tell everybody one of our gain of function viruses looks like it's going to kill 5 to 10 million people. Gee whiz, we're sorry. We promise we won't do it again. That wasn't the plan. So what the hell is Kaylee doing holding Crimson Contagion documents at the podium? Nothing in her hand says SARS-CoV-2 on it. Nothing in her hand says COVID. When she gets off the helicopter with the president, she's clutching these documents in her hand. There's no COVID on it. This had nothing to do with COVID. There, not a single note on here says SARS-CoV-2 or COVID. I told Dave Collum they were trying to hide a pandemic. I just thought it was a different strain. I thought it was 1918, H1N1. Donald Trump gets to the microphone 40 times and says it's 1917. It's 1917. What the hell is he talking about? An avian influenza that Dr. Kawaoka from Wisconsin has been doing gain of function on with Ron Fouchier, H7N9. What do they have in common? Why did I think one of them was the other one? Because they both have this thing where they can infect other organs. They don't need an ACE2 receptor to bind. They don't need trypsin. That means they can infect your red blood cells. They can infect your spleen. It can infect your kidneys. It can cross the blood-brain barrier. And in fact, in 1917, we see something called sleeping sickness, encephalitis lethargica. And Jeffrey Taubenberger does a paper saying it looks like encephalitis lethargica is caused by avian influenza. This isn't the theory. This is Dr. Margaret Chan at the WHO. This happened in China starting in 2013, and it was a problem. And this guy, Dr. Kawaoka, has been screwing around with this thing since before 2013. But in 2014, during the pause for gain of function, he gets funding to go screw with it. And the gain of function pause, he's told, yeah, that doesn't apply to you. You go do your gain of function, even though nobody else is allowed to. All right, that's Kawaoka. The CDC documents how it reemerged in 2019 as a highly pathogenic virus in China. Crimson Contagion isn't a theoretical. It's happening, according to the CDC. It's here. H7 virus infections can cause disease that affects multiple internal organs. That's not COVID. That's this. How does it do it? It doesn't need trypsin. That means it doesn't need a special ACE2 receptor. Have you guys heard stories about people with influenza that lost their limbs? They're losing extremities. It's because it's infecting their circulatory system. And so it looks like gangrene. That's what's happening here. This disease has the ability, this virus has the ability to cross the blood-brain barrier, infect the circulatory system itself, and infect the nervous system. And again, this isn't me, guys. I'm just reading the stuff and giving you the summary of the stuff I've highlighted here. This isn't me. I'm just hitting the play button for you. H7N9 disrupts the monolayer human brain microvascular endothelium in vitro. Okay, so it does it in the test tube. And then I've got the articles from Taubenberger saying it's encephalitis lethargica. Encephalitis lethargica is caused by avian influenza. Well, that's long COVID, guys. This is the deadliest avian influenza in human history, meaning it was Europe, it's Canada, it's Japan. They've been culling chickens everywhere. Why are eggs $8 a dozen a year ago? What the hell was that all about? And by the way, Dr. Jensen, Minnesota, west of Iowa something. There's some area west of the Twin Cities. It's kind of a hotbed, and I'm guessing Tyson's got a factory out there because there's an area west of the Twin Cities that is one heck of a hotbed that I'll have to show you on the map. I'll send it to you in email. But they're culling chickens everywhere, in Australia, in South Africa, in Europe. Guys, this isn't a theory. This is happening all over the world, and we thought influenza disappeared? How did it disappear if you've got a quarter of the egg-laying chickens on Earth just died? What the hell is the Pentagon involved in monitoring influenza for unless we've got one hell of a problem here? This is the Pentagon. This looks serious to me. This looks like this is no joke. This looks to me like Kayleigh McEnany is scared out of her mind that Dr. Kawaoka's avian influenza is about to kill 7, 8, 9, 10 million people around the world. Dave and I talked about how do you hide a pandemic? You don't put the strain in the biofire test. Well, guess what? It's worse than that. Not only is this strain H7N9 not in any commercial test, Dr. Jensen, you ready for this? They pulled the test off the market in January of 2020. And it only reemerged on the market January 15th, 6 weeks ago. So January 15th of 2024, they reintroduced the H7N9 test kit, but you can only get it from the CDC or the WHO. It is not available commercially. It's not in Eplex, Panther, BioFire. Nobody has this strain.
And when did they pull it again?
They pulled it in January of 2020.
Gotcha.
So it's been gone for 4 years. So for 4 years, there was no way to test for this unless you were in China. The Chinese never stopped testing for it. The Chinese knew exactly what's going on. But outside of China, there was no test available in the Western world. That's how influenza disappears. A, there's no test. But B, you guys know that I was a magician as a kid, right? I was an obnoxious little magician kid. I'm going to show you how the magic trick is done. How do you make influenza disappear? Watch. Ready? That's how you do it. That's the legend. Anybody see H7 on there? So what happens when H7N9 becomes the dominant strain? What happens? It's not being tracked. If it's not there and it becomes the dominant strain, what happens?
You don't see it.
Ta-da! And
You can't find what you're not looking for.
well, and you can't find what you can't look for. They pulled the test. So A, you can't test for it, and B, they don't track it. You talk about, man, you can't find it, and they don't track it. Nice, huh? Nice. So what the hell are all these guys doing? Look at how well all these companies have got vaccines by January 28th. Why do they all have vaccine candidates this far along 3 weeks into this if there's only 106 people dead on Earth and there's no one dead outside of China? No one is dead outside of China. 106 people were dead on the planet. And these guys are this far along on the vaccines. Brad Wenstrup says just recently, this just came out, and he said, yeah, we're going to take a look at Kawaoka, but he doesn't mention H7N9. Guys, this is the real pandemic. Crimson Contagion is an H7N9 outbreak in China. 1/4 of the egg-laying chickens on Earth just died. Moderna shows an H7 vaccine in their pipeline. It's number 2 up there, the second one down. So they are showing an H7 vaccine in the pipeline. This is 2016 at the Goldman conference. There's no SARS-CoV-2 in here. We haven't even identified SARS-CoV-2. But the H7 product is already in development. Novartis is already in clinical trials in 2013 with their H7N9. And Pfizer signs an mRNA vaccine deal 2018 for mRNA influenza vaccines, not SARS-CoV-2. August of 2018, $120 million for mRNA influenza vaccines. Here's the letter authorizing Dr. Kawaoka to do gain of function on H7N9. This is 2014, funded by Dr. Fauci. And that's the smoking gun, guys. This is it. They did gain of function on an avian flu. And this also doesn't need trypsin, meaning it can infect anything in the body, just like the H1N1. That's why they're so similar. That's why most people don't know that there's 2 different viruses. And that, my friends, is the story.
It would have been nice if they had done autopsies, because the autopsies in 18 were really revealing, because the brain hemorrhaging was a very prominent trait. And if we had done autopsies, we would have seen that pathology. I actually checked my email box while you were talking, and I'm actually in a discussion with a biochemist in the first week of January about vaccines. And I can't quite figure out why, except for one of them makes allusion. You know, this guy from MIT, it's an Indian guy, I can't remember his name, and he's kind of a wacky guy, and he puts forth wild ideas, but I presented him to the biochemist. So what do you think of this? So something had vaccines on my radar prior to January 13th.
And the question is why? If there's nobody,
I don't know where I was picking it up. It was a general vaccine concern, and I don't remember what triggered it besides this MIT guy, who again is sort of jack of all trades, master of none, best I can tell.
Dr. Jensen, what are you thinking?
Well, just a little context. I remember when Tim Pawlenty was the governor of Minnesota between 2002 and 2010. And I remember at one point during that time, he asked me if I would give him my frank advice regarding what he should do about an emerging avian influenza outbreak. And I remember we talked about it, and we talked about the fact that generally avian influenza viruses were not transmissible to humans. And so the question was, should Governor Pawlenty raise the level of response to orange and things like this? And just to give some broader context to what we're talking about, John, that you've been, going deep into the weeds on, I think that you make a very good point. We've had these sort of schizophrenic coverage by mainstream media, where over here we'll have influenza, over here we'll have the fact that some chicken operation had to kill all of its birds, and then with COVID, we intersect that with one more. So now we've got standard human influenza, H1N1, or whichever variant or strain we're dealing with that given year. And then we've got the avian flu, and then now we've got COVID. But if you go back, I think sometimes it helps to go back in time and look at the context of what the major news media was publishing. And if you go back to the New York Times in March of 2020, so now March 19th of 2020, the first shutdown was March 17th of 2020 on St. Patty's Day. So in Minnesota, we shut down schools and businesses, yada, yada, yada. But on that day, in the New York Times, they talked about the fact that Trump's administration had run an exercise a year earlier. And they had looked at what could happen, so to speak, when you're up. And the White House defended its record. Now in early 2020, they defended their record about what they did with the 2019 exercise, which was carried out from January to August.
That's right.
What they did was they defended their record by pointing to an executive order to improve the availability and quality of flu vaccines.
That's
Not
right.
any coronavirus vaccines. They said flu vaccines. And in that, they don't make any case for, we're going to change the nature of the vaccines we're making. We're going to change the whole thing. Instead of the influenza vaccine program, which we've been using year in, year out to mixed reports of success, we're going with flu vaccines. There's nothing in there about we're going to go to a code of instructions to change the way the RNA works in a human body. This is what bothers people so deeply, is that at the very beginning of the pandemic, 2020, first, it seemed like in January, we were being told, don't worry about it, don't worry about it. In February, we were told, you don't need to be wearing masks, don't do those kind of things. Tony Fauci, this and that. Tony Fauci and people like Mike Osterholm in Minnesota were comparing it to influenza. And in the meantime, the Trump administration was saying, yep, we ran this whole exercise in 2019, and we made a very appropriate response by trying to make sure that we could rapidly improve availability and quality of flu vaccines. So in 2020, when it hits, and people said, well, what is this warp speed program? This was a program that was not built on changing the entire way we do vaccines. This was built on flu vaccines. This was taking the standard regimen and the methodology. So I think to just go just a little further, I think this is why the absolute loss of public trust occurred, is because in January and February of 2020, it didn't add up. We are seeing time sequences, like you pointed out earlier, where in September of 2020, we've got Mike Pence referring back to early 2020, and we're not talking about COVID. We're talking about a warp speed vaccine program. And then I also looked up this other article by CNN. This was September 1st, 2020. And I think this is important, John. On September 1st, 2020, we're 2 months before the election. President Trump hasn't contracted COVID yet. And the headline article was, past vaccine disasters show why rushing a coronavirus vaccine now would be colossally stupid. And this was, vaccine experts were warning the federal government against rushing out a coronavirus vaccine because they were concerned that this would backfire. And this was in September of 2020. And if you remember some of the campaign videos, you had guys like Joe Biden and Kamala Harris saying, no way in hell would I take a vaccine that was rushed to market. No way I would take a vaccine like that. And then literally 5-6 months later, anybody who didn't go along with the absolute reversal of Joe Biden, who's now saying everybody's got to get a vaccine or you want to kill grandma, anybody that didn't go along with Joe Biden's rapid flip was a conspiracy theorist. This is why we're in the situation we're in today in 2024, which I think we're having people like you go deep into the weeds, trying to tease out important facts and important disconnects. But we're also having another whole set of people saying, we've got to look at that 30,000 foot view. And we have to understand, because we've got another election coming up, and we're leery of the fact that we can't trust our government. It's interesting. If you go back to 1976, John, this is the same thing that happened when Jerry Ford was running for re-election with the swine flu vaccine program. The summer of 1976, you had big pharma saying, we're not going to produce the vaccine unless you indemnify us, unless you insure us against liability. And then what did Jerry Ford have to do? Okay, he finally said, okay, we'll give you the indemnification, we'll cover it. And this is the way it got out there. And they did this rapid a quarter of the population of America was vaccinated. And all of a sudden we saw deaths, we saw Guillain-Barré, and boom, we saw the suspension of the program, and we saw the election take place, and Jerry Ford's out and Jimmy Carter's in. That's why people are having a hard time trusting the government right now.
Understandably. I mean, when you look at this data, when you look at these materials, so first of all, I want to encourage you guys that the easiest and fastest way to confirm what I'm showing you, go to YouTube and type in China H7N9. It's that easy. You're going to see 30 videos. You're going to be like, oh my God, how did I miss this? China H7N9 or China avian flu. And you're going to be inundated with stuff. You're going to be like, my God, no.
Why didn't they just run with that one? Let's say there was they wanted one to run with. Why didn't they just take that one and say that's the killer virus?
So so here's what it looks like to me. The documentation that we have from this Food and Agricultural Organization at the United Nations says it starts in 2013. 2014, a year into this, Kawaoka gets funded to do gain of function on that virus. It's like, why? The one in China is not deadly enough? We need one that's 200 times more deadly? So Fauci funds that in 2014. And then in 2017, the outbreak in China magically becomes highly pathogenic with a new strain that shows up on the other side of the Yangtze River. It's kind of weird. Almost like Kawaoka took a trip there, or one of his minions. So all of a sudden it goes highly pathogenic in China.
Not to interrupt, John. One of the, just as a knowledge, just kind of random data point. I just put something in our email group of all of us. There's one thing that's like never really been explained. Sorry, I don't mean to go on a side real quick. But there's one weird video that's from a couple days before Christmas 2020, and it's acting Secretary of Defense Chris Miller giving a speech, and he's got Pence behind him, and he like interrupts Trump. He goes, "I don't mean to go off topic, but I get a little emotional because." And he says something like, in the last couple of weeks, we've undergone the most complex DoD operations like in history. And you see like Pence nodding. And there's always been a conspiracy around that. Like, what was that? They never mention what it is. They don't say it's COVID. They don't say it's, Area 51, aliens. They just never address it. And it's still hanging out there. And I just watched it the other night, and it's just making me think of, what Dr. Jensen said, going back and really just kind of taking all the little exotic, when you're doing a puzzle, and like you have a piece, you're like, I don't know what that one's for, and it's just bugging me. It's bright orange or something, and you have it over to the side. That's just, like the near Earth objects in the field hospitals. That's just another weird data point. And I don't know, maybe looking at it in the light of Crimson Contagion is different, and a quarter of all chicken laying eggs are killed. It's just a weird thing to have a Secretary of Defense be like, I don't mean
Pompeo. Mike Pompeo says on the podium, says we're in a live exercise here.
So that's what I mean. It's like, this is the most complex operations we've ever, and they're all kind of nodding. And you're like, what was that about?
Let me answer Dave's question though. Let me answer Dave's question. So Dave said, why not just tell everybody? So if they
why not run with that as the deadly virus and vaccinate the shit out of everyone and just call it a day?
No, everybody asks the same question. It's a common question. I'm used to this one. So the choices are, yikes, it looks like Dr. Kawaoka's H7N9 that we did gain a function on during the pause is out and might kill 7 million people. Gee whiz, we're sorry. We promise we won't let it happen again. The other option is release a patsy virus at the Wuhan place and blame China and tell everybody China killed 7 million people. Which option do you think the kids at Langley voted for? Patsy virus and a whole cover-up campaign, or tell everybody, gee whiz, we made a screw up. It looks like 7 million are going to die because we did gain of function in Wisconsin. I think release a Patsy virus and blame China gets unanimous support at Langley. That's their speed. You think we want to admit, yikes, we did some gain of function, and it looks like we're going to kill all the chickens and 7-10 million people. They got to cover it up. They don't want to admit we did this. They want to blame China. So that's Crimson Contagion. The part they're not telling you is the part where they said, okay, how do we blame China? How do we come up with a way to blame China? Well, first, make sure this virus, H7N9, isn't in any of the PCR tests, and any of the test kits that are out there, get them the hell off the market. Get them off. Remember when the test kits were contaminated, guys? And they said, we don't have any test kits. They all got contaminated. The CDC had to destroy all the test kits because they were contaminated. Now, they had to destroy them because they would have detected this stuff. So they get rid of the H7N9. And it just came back on the market January 15th, 2024. Just came back, and you have to special order it from the CDC. So they don't want to admit we just killed 7 million people. It's Wuhan, and bat. By the way, here's the genius of Langley. The genius of Langley is it's not influenza, it's COVID, it's coronavirus, and it's not a food supply animal. When you hear bats and pangolins, you're not thinking grocery store. The real virus is in the food supply, guys. It's in the chickens. It's in the eggs. 1/4 of the egg-laying chickens just died in America and Canada and Japan and Australia and South Africa and Europe. That's where influenza didn't disappear. That was absurd. It disappeared from 100 countries at the same time? Come on.
You said this particular avian flu gets into organs like maybe liver, kidney?
Yes, sir.
So then one would make the argument that I guess I give credit to Brian Ardis for coming up with the thesis that that those failures were actually the remdesivir treatment, or is it both?
No, it is. So both. Obviously, remdesivir is a disaster, right? It failed for Ebola.
It kills people. Yeah.
It's a disaster. Yeah. It failed for Ebola. It was in the trash pile. It was designed for Ebola, and it did not get approval. Why they thought this would be effective. So this is kind of the part that's killing me right now.
Well, the dark interpretation is it got the body count up.
Right. And there's another dark piece of this, Dr. Jensen, which is that Xofluza treats this. And this is why me being wrong that it was H1N1 1918 reconstructed was close enough for horseshoes, meaning the treatment, the effective therapeutic for H1N1 1918 that I was telling everybody about was Xofluza. Xofluza is also effective against H7N9. Why didn't they tell people that? All the hullabaloo about hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin, I'm not talking about that virus. I'm talking about a chicken virus. I'm talking about the avian flu. Xofluza is effective. It's from Genentech. It's one dose. It's either 1 tablet or 2 tablets based on your body weight. And that's it. There's no second dose. Now, there's another treatment called nitazoxanide, which is a linea. And that is an antiparasitic that has also shown efficacy against avian flu. But I think that 500 milligram dose is way too high. I've already heard from people say it makes them nauseous. So that would be like for residual. I think long COVID, Dr. Jensen, is encephalitis lethargica. And if you read the literature on encephalitis lethargica, it's caused by avian influenza. Well, 1/4 of the chickens just died.
That's the technical term for chronic sleep disorder?
Correct. Sleeping sickness is encephalitis lethargica. And if you do a quick search for encephalitis lethargica Taubenberger, he writes the paper saying encephalitis lethargica is caused by avian influenza. He also is the guy who wrote the paper about 1917 avian influenza. And that's when we see sleeping sickness. And by the way, guess what else we saw in 1917? You guys are going to fall out of your chair on this one. Not just sleeping sickness. What else do we see in 1917? Measles. Measles outbreak alongside the avian influenza in 1917. It's documented.
It's also the year the inventor of the Zeppelin died. Sorry, I just
very nice, Tommy.
Just finished a book today.
Tommy with the fascinating non sequiturs.
Sorry, Graf Ferdinand von Zeppelin, 1917. Sorry.
Very nice.
I'll shut up. Sorry.
He read that off a Snapple cap.
Yeah, I'm gonna look so smart.
So, gentlemen, there was a pandemic well underway. In fact, when Donald Trump took office, his first week, they had to brief him on this. This is underway in China, 2017. It's already highly pathogenic. They're killing chickens.
Don't they tend to burn out faster than that? I'm trying to, you mentioned 2013. Don't these strains tend to die out? And so why is it reappearing?
Because you got Kawaoka drops
doing it. So it has to be GOF.
Yeah. And they did it near the Yangtze River, man. This is, in other words, if you've got a pond full of normal ducks and you just introduce a super duck into that pond, next thing you know, you got a pond full of super ducks. And everybody thinks it's a natural occurrence. So
let me fill in another one. I got a reach out from a guy who I didn't know if he was legit or not, but I've gotten to know him as, I would almost call him a friend. He's Canadian military intelligence. He happened to be competing in the World Military Games in Wuhan in October of 2019, and he said two things.
They were quarantined.
Two things. One is that the athletes said there were no Chinese in sight. And the other thing is the athletes all got sicker than hell. He said we all got sicker than crap. And so he was trying to get people to pay attention to this. And I couldn't tell if he was legit. I have subsequent, yes.
All right. So this is before COVID. So let's talk
officially.
All right. This is also in Bobby Kennedy's book, by the way. So Bobby Kennedy Jr.'s book talks about the Wuhan Games, and America sends a team there, but the outbreak's already underway. It's already underway. By the way, by January 2020, Italy has 3 million cases. By January 2020, 3 million cases of influenza.
Now they explained that by claiming that there was a bigger pipeline between China and Italy than any other European country. Does that not make sense?
No, this is influenza I'm talking about, not COVID. I'm saying there's 3 million cases of influenza. No, there's no direct flights from like Bergamo to Wuhan. I checked. There's no direct flight. Yeah, it's like a 16-hour trip to get from Bergamo to Wuhan. You got to change planes twice. Okay. It's a pain in the neck. But net of it is, this is happening. H7N9 outbreak in China. Lots of literature on it. Avian flu China, H7N9 China are the searches you want to do. Crimson contagion's real. And they hand it to Trump first week in office. They dropped this in his lap. And he's like, what the hell? I don't know. What chickens and viruses? Somebody call Fauci. I don't want, he doesn't want to deal with this crap. And for 3 years, he's trying to keep it at bay. He's trying to keep it at bay. And that's why he downplays it and downplays it and downplays it. As you were talking about, Dr. Jensen, you were saying, early, he was like, it's no different than the flu. He changes his tune March 10th, 11th. I believe that's because they showed him these incoming asteroids. And then May 1st, they put all the hospitals away. All the field hospitals are put away May 1st. And so that whole problem goes away. And then it's back to covering up the chicken virus with the China virus.
Now, I don't think you can see this flu in the all-cause mortality numbers in the world, correct? They don't start spiking until 2021, actually.
No, that's not true.
Correct?
No.
Okay.
All-cause mortality in the United States begins March of 2020. March of 2020 is excess deaths, right? We're talking about all-cause mortality.
That's right. Above the norm, yeah.
All right, so excess deaths in the United States begins in March of 2020, and I can show that to you guys if you like. Let me show you that here.
But it really picks up in 2021, which is where the vaccine story kicks in.
Sort of.
Yeah, that's not going to show it. You're not going to see it. Well,
Well,
you
here.
see a little bit. You
All
see
right,
it a
so
little bit, yeah.
all right, so on the left-hand side, where it crosses the red line, that's
Yeah.
March 28th. So all the way to the left, where it crosses the red line, that's March
Okay.
28th of 2020. So throughout, the bottom is where you see the date. So January 1st is that first big peak. The first big peak is January 1st, 2021. So, but prior to that, we had plenty of excess deaths prior to inoculations. And in
Okay.
fact, you see how it dips back down mid 2021. It actually goes back and meets the red line, doesn't come back up in a big way until late 2021. Looks like September, October into January 2022. But we haven't had a whole lot of excess deaths, quite frankly, since February 2022. There was a little peak there in January 23, but since then there haven't been that many excess deaths. So this is the data from the CDC. People like who's that, Ed Dowd, he won't talk about anything to the left of the vaccines. And we've got a whole year of excess deaths here that he won't even talk about.
They're not in it. I haven't read his book. I wish I had the time, but I haven't. His book doesn't show that data.
He speaks a lot at events and on Twitter. He's very active.
I know Eddie. I've known Eddie for about 20 years now. So
well, ask him. So ask him point blank. Here, I'll send you this slide. March 28th is when we have excess deaths of 2020. There's no vaccines in 2020. So what the hell's accounting for it? And why are there more dead people in New York than there are in Shanghai? Right? Because we're not talking about the same virus. We're not talking about COVID. This isn't COVID. These deaths are avian influenza, but it's not in the test kit. How the hell are you going to fool Scott Jensen? How are you going to fool a guy who's been doing this his whole life? You don't put it in the test kit. And so when he looks at the results, he goes, no, it says you don't have it. That's how you fool a man. You have to actively do it. You have to actively. Now, who does that? Langley. Langley does that. Langley comes up with a plan and says, don't put it in the test kit. Kill all the. What do you mean all the tests are contaminated? All the tests in America are contaminated at the CDC? How did they all get contaminated? This has been going on for 10 years, guys. A quarter of the egg-laying chickens just died. It's the worst avian influenza outbreak in human history. And it causes encephalitis lethargica. And it doesn't need trypsin. It crosses the blood-brain barrier. It infects red blood cells and nerves. It can affect the nervous system. That's why you don't have any taste or any smell, because it enters the nasopharyngeal orifice. Those are the first nerve endings it comes to. It says, okay, I'll make myself at home right here. No need to try. I don't need to go all the way to the spleen or the kidney. I'm going to start here. I was infected with this when I lived in Thailand. It spreads through the body. As one part of your body figures out how to suppress it, it moves. It doesn't need special receptors. This is a strange virus, guys. This is a different kind of cat. This is what happens when you let Kawaoka do gain of function. That's what happens. 7 million people die. And people are losing limbs. If you if you do a search for flu lost limbs, you'll see a 16-year-old kid lost his hands and feet. A woman lost her arms and legs from the flu because it's attacking the circulatory system.
John, to interject, I think for an awful lot of people who don't go as deeply into the weeds as you do, with their level of understanding of trypsin and a variety of molecular interactions, I think a big part of the take-home story is that in early 2020, as our nation was going through a time like never before, where governors in multiple states, as well as the president, both President Trump and subsequently President Biden, as executive orders were being put in place, and the spokesperson to the nation was Tony Fauci. I think there's an awful lot of people who believe that there was just this smoke screen. And initially it was the virus. And was it indeed this China virus? Was it the COVID virus? And was it January or the last week of December when Dr. Lee had 8 patients in the hospital that had this odd kind of respiratory infection? And then we had the arguments about the gain of function. We had the arguments about when did it come out? And there was the blame on, well, the China data wasn't reliable. And then we heard, well, it wasn't really January, it was mid-December, then it was mid-November, and then it was, well, it was actually last September in 2019. And you make a very good point that we weren't finding any influenza. How could influenza just literally disappear from the globe? It made no sense. When you put this whole thing together, and then if you just wrap into what you said about excess deaths, arguably what the American people were being told is, this is very confusing, but this is a COVID virus. This is the second COVID virus. The first coronavirus was with SARS back in 2002 and 3. But don't worry, we've got this vaccine. And then we find comments about the vaccine, as you mentioned, made in the fall of 2020, referencing comments made in the first couple of months of 2020. And then we see excess deaths take place in 2020, which was arguably predictable because of this pandemic. But what should have happened then is the excess deaths should have started to fall off in 2021, and they didn't. We went from 2.9 million deaths a year in America in 2018 and 2019, and then it went up in 2020 big time, and I think it went up to something like 3.35 million deaths. But the next year, now with the vaccine there that was supposed to, save the day, it didn't go down, it went up even more.
Correct.
That's where I think the total dismantling of the trust took place. And then we had the subsequent problems of, we had Joe Biden coming out and saying, well, I'm going to unilaterally dictate that companies have to mandate that their employees get fired or they got to fire them. And it took the Supreme Court to step in and say, no, you don't have the right to do that. So that was thrown out the window. And now here we sit in 2024, once again, with an election right in front of us, and people feel like what they're seeing is goulash. There's no clarity at all. It's absolutely goulash. And that's one of the reasons why I appreciate the opportunity to participate in this conversation with you, John, and with our colleagues, because this is a huge issue. And unless we have some level of accountability, there is nothing that should make Americans feel good about the future.
I'm glad you said that. And Dave, I want to hear what you think about this, because once I saw all this stuff, you know what kind of freaked me out and scared the hell out of me? Rand Paul knows all of it. So does Senator Ron Johnson. They know all about Crimson Contagion. Everything I just told you, these guys know it.
Another piece.
So here's an interesting thing. Scott may or may not know this group, the Doctors for COVID Ethics. It's a Zoom group formed, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago. It was a bunch of doctors from all over the world who said something's wrong here, and a lot of them lost their jobs. And since then they've been meeting twice a week, every week. And I have not heard this come through that group, although I've ghosted the group enough times I could have missed it. But I've heard a tremendous amount, but I've not heard about this H7N9 story go through I'll ask them
on purpose.
I may go on. There's one tonight. I may ask them if that got discussed or not. That'll be an interesting
how effective
question.
It's been. So think about this. Pull the lens back for a second. You guys both know I've been harping on this H1N1 1918 thing for 3.5 years. Right?
Yes.
I shared it with Scott Jensen the first time we met. That was January 2021. I've been maniacal about it. Nobody else wants to talk about influenza. The only thing you see on Twitter is, how did influenza disappear? Like, a couple guys jump on that bandwagon. Nobody wants to talk about influenza.
Well, there is a simple explanation for that. And the simple explanation is that there was such a tremendous financial incentive to call it COVID that
Yeah.
basically the hospitals were said, look, if you click the COVID box, you're going to get a ton of money, or you don't click the box, you go
Well,
bankrupt. And so
that was
then
Dr. Jensen. Yeah. So Scott Jensen is the guy who breaks that story. He's the whistleblower who comes forward and tells everybody it's $13,000 to admit him, $39,000 to ventilate him, and $77,000 if we get to 100 admissions. I remember.
And I think it also gets even higher if they end in the ICU. I mean, it was really huge money, as I recall. And so,
Scott, you broke the story.
as a hospital
right?
administrator, well,
Scott broke the
didn't
story.
you really break that story, Scott?
Yeah.
I thought it just kind of came out immediately.
No, Scott was
in
on
any
Laura
event,
Ingram. He was on Laura Ingram with this thing.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Laura asked me, why would there be such a powerful motivation for hospitals to use COVID-19 as a discharge diagnosis? And I was in the Senate at the time, and I have a lot of friends who are hospital administrators. So I just made some phone calls and said, for a Medicare patient, what are you getting for garden variety pneumonia admission? And they're getting about 5,000. I said, what are you getting if it's a COVID pneumonia? And it was 13,000. And then if the ventilator was used, it was closer to 39,000. And John's absolutely right. If you hit
for remdesivir, right? They were getting 3,000 for using remdesivir,
but
and
that was a little later.
Everywhere.
Yeah, the remdesivir didn't come out in the first few months. That came out more into the latter part of 2020.
Okay.
Yeah, Scott found these motivators, these bonuses in, I think it was April 2020. He was already on the news in Minnesota. Laura Ingram's team picks it up, and I'm talking to Laura behind the scenes. So I'm having a private email relationship with Laura, sending her stuff about 1918 H1N1, 1918 H1N1. And when I see the president talking about this 1917, and that 1917 is avian flu, how would he even know this? He's a germaphobe.
Another
They briefed him. Somebody had to sit him down and say, you heard of the Spanish flu, right? Well, the year before that, there was this other thing, and it was horrible. How the hell would he know all this stuff? We didn't know it. Nobody I know knew that there were two different viruses, 1917 versus 1918. This isn't common knowledge. And he won't let it go. He says it 40, 50 times. It's meaningful. It's meaningful, guys. What do you got?
Another data point. I think I've told you this in a past episode, but for Dr. Jensen and for Dave, is I've had on Will Arkin several times. He's a former Army intelligence author, and my favorite book of his, The Generals Have No Clothes. At the very end, it's just kind of a closing, just bringing it up to modern speed. But the vault doors at NORAD in Cheyenne Mountain in Colorado, they didn't close those on 9/11. They closed them during the Cuban Missile Crisis, and they closed them in, I think, January 2020. They've been closed 2 times. Not on 9/11, but they closed the vault doors right when COVID came to the U.S. And then
Hang on. They closed them March 11th, 2020.
Okay, sorry, March, not January. And they had 2 separate teams. They had blue team and silver team, completely, 14-day quarantine. Got to be it, in case there's any latent. I thought that was not 9/11, but this just interesting fun fact.
That was about the field hospitals.
Okay.
So that's when they showed the president that stuff March 10th. March 11th, the news media goes bonkers. March 13th is the national emergency. March 28th is the impact in a Curray. April 27th is the convergence. And May 1st, they put all the hospitals away. And that was it. That's the end of that story. So that story came and went, and that was that. And May 1st, what field hospitals? What field? I don't remember any field hospitals. What are you talking about? So that story comes and goes. May 1st, we put them away. They stood for 10 days. That had nothing to do. By the way, we put all the airplanes away too. That also had nothing to do with the virus. So, but that's separate. That's a separate disaster he had to deal with in the midst of all this. But the point is, the whole outbreak of COVID and the December 30th and Peter Daszak, guys, that's all a red herring. That's the cover-up. This had been going on for years. Crimson Contagion is them figuring out how the hell are we going to cover this up? All right, we'll do Event 201. We'll get everybody thinking about COVID, coronaviruses, not influenza. And now we're talking about bats and pangolins and raccoon dogs. They don't have that at Kroger.
I love the raccoon dogs.
There's no raccoon dog at Kroger. Nobody's thinking food supply. When you say bats and pangolins and raccoon dogs, nobody's thinking food supply.
You haven't eaten a raccoon dog, apparently.
Not yet, but I'm game. So
the other thing that you hinted at, John,
yeah,
which really is part of the video record, is that when they talk about, I have in my head a video where they said there were 49 deaths. Mm-hmm. And there's this timeline, and in a country like China with 1.4 billion people, none of those numbers would be a signal. I mean, you could lose people all over China and it would just be flu deaths. Like, another guy died, so what?
That's my point.
That's exactly right. So the fact that they were sequencing something after a couple dozen deaths makes no sense whatsoever.
No. One. The guy from who that we just listened to said that we have 41 patients, 41 cases, 1 death, and we got the sequence.
Right.
I'm like, why?
No, that makes no sense.
If there was one guy who died in Minnesota and there were 41 cases of pneumonia at Minnesota General, I don't think anybody's even going to notice. And we're talking about Wuhan, China. Why is Peter Daszak worried about 41 cases of pneumonia in Wuhan if there's nobody dead? Nobody's died.
Right.
We get to January 10th. We got 1 guy dead. So now I need you guys to help me figure this out. That contract that Mike Pence is bragging that the president signed on January 13th. How the hell is that for COVID?
Well, there's another backstory, which a lot of people didn't track down, but I went back and read analyst reports about Moderna from 2016 and 17. And Moderna was considered almost a scam operation. So they had a big market cap, but we know scam operations with big market caps. But the Wall Street analysts were hammering Moderna.
Never brought a product
for going into vaccines because they thought it was not going to be a profit stream that would justify their market cap. And so somehow Moderna hung tough on the vaccine story, and one would therefore probably add to that story the fact that Moderna knew something was coming, period.
Yeah. Well, no.
That's in 17. That was in 17.
Yeah. Well, this is 2016. This is the Goldman Sachs conference. Oh, no, wait. Replaced in September 2017. So you're right. This is the Goldman Sachs conference, and this is their pipeline. So this is them showing the investors, here's what we're working on. And in infectious diseases, the H7 vaccine is the second one from the top. H10 is number 1, then H7. And they're working on Zika, they're working on chikungunya, they're working on all kinds of crazy stuff.
But Wall Street did not like this presentation.
I get it.
Wall Street thought it was a very bad idea because, for one thing, it's a one-dose treatment rather than a maintenance treatment. And therefore, and at some level, you can even see it if you look at, say, for example, the performance of Pfizer over the course of the entire story. Pfizer is below the price it started in the pandemic. And so the idea that Pfizer got stinking rich from this pandemic isn't even true.
That's interesting. Well, and again, so one of the things that Dr. Jensen mentioned was this executive order for the modernization of influenza vaccines. And that was signed in September of 2019 by Trump. And the thing that's kind of weird is that Pfizer had already signed an mRNA contract in 2018 for influenza. So we didn't have the executive order for the modernization, meaning we're still growing the stuff in eggs. And yet we signed a $120 million deal with Pfizer for mRNA influenza vaccines. So that's in 2018. And then January of 2020, with one guy dead, he signs a deal with Moderna. I think the Moderna deal is also for the H7 and 9. He's got 4,000 people dying a week. Every week, 4,000 more people are dying. And there's one guy dead in China. Who the hell cares about that? That's the cover-up. That's 4,000 a week in one guy. Why would we sign a contract for Moderna for COVID vaccines if I got 41 cases and one guy's dead? And I got 4,000 dying a week over here from this chicken problem from Kawaoka in Wisconsin? I just showed you Pfizer. The Pfizer contract is influenza mRNA. I think the Moderna contract that Ivanka is bragging about, remember when I showed you the tweet? It doesn't say COVID. It doesn't say SARS-CoV-2. That's because Mike Pence is a religious guy. He doesn't want to go to hell.
I wonder, and this is you got to be careful with this explanation because it's very convenient. You can explain away everything with it. But I've had on Dr. Stephen Hatfill here before, who wrote the book 3 Seconds
what's the
to
name
Midnight.
again? I missed that.
Dr. Stephen Hatfill, bioweapons expert. I've had him on here. I've had Ken Albeck on here. But Dr. Hatfill's book 3 Seconds to Midnight, and then I've also had on Garrett Graff and his book Raven Rock, Continuity of Government, kind of NORAD, all that shit. He's talking about just how many of he's like, when we talk about stockpiles, it's not stockpiles for you and I, it's stockpiles in military bunkers. I mean, you wouldn't know because it would be classified, which again is a very seducing explanation of, oh, this is what it is. It's classified, therefore you can't know. But I mean, you always wonder if this is something like Crimson Contagion, if it's a military operation. I mean, God knows. I mean, there could be contracts for things where they make 100 million doses and you and I will never hear about it until it's declassified in 50 years. Again, seductive explanation because you can explain away everything with that, but just kind of 2 cents.
Yeah. About a dozen years ago, I read a book about vaccine development post John Barry's book, and it was not biased, best I could tell. It sounded like a guy was just trying to explain it. The military has an enormous number of vaccines that are so lethal they can't use them.
Yeah.
And as a consequence, they're just stockpiled for some reason.
It's
vaccines,
an all-out war. If it's like, hey, this is going to kill 3 out of 10 people, but the virus will kill 9 out of 10 people,
right.
Fuck off.
The other thing is it illustrates how hard it is to develop a safe vaccine, which is basically Kennedy's argument.
Wasn't Scott Jensen, sir, weren't you in the Air Force? Were you an Air Force physician?
No, I'm not. I never served.
Okay, must have been a dream I had. Okay, forgive me.
Yeah, weird dreams.
So again, I don't want to make you guys terribly uncomfortable, but I feel like Trump was trying to keep this thing at bay, was hoping it wasn't going to turn into a disaster. And come January 2020, he's got 4,000 dying a week. He's got 3 million cases in Italy. I think he's like, damn it. This is an election year. Yeah. He really,
Well, that worked out well.
Yeah.
This is going to be the green van effect. There's an actual formal name for it, but you buy a green van, and only then do you notice that there's green vans all over the road. And so this is going to be one of these things where I'm going to be reading along. Oh, there it is again.
Avian influenza. Yeah. Now, here's the thing. Just like with COVID, how COVID, I believe, is the red herring for the H7N9. Right now, I've been talking about this for a couple months now. It's getting some traction. You are going to see the new red herring will be H5N1 avian influenza. So any articles about H5N1 in a seal, in a walrus, we found some in a penguin, who cares? We're 10 years into an H7N9 pandemic that apparently just killed 1/4 of the egg-laying chickens on Earth and 7 million people. Because COVID, SARS-CoV-2, didn't kill 4,000 in Nigeria. It didn't kill 30,000 in Bangladesh. How deadly could it be if there's not 30,000 people dead in Bangladesh? There's not 35,000 dead in Pakistan. They got over 200 million people in Pakistan. It's not that. It's a real virus. It came from EcoHealth. The CIA calls up Peter Daszak and they said, Peter, what do you have that causes pneumonia? I need something wicked. And ideally, if it has some things that people will recognize, like a GP120 or a furin cleavage CGG sequence, even better, because I want people to obsess about it so that they're not looking over here with the chickens. Peter Daszak is sort of the hero. He shows up with the Patsy virus and says, yeah, we got exactly what you need. We have it in Wuhan. We'll release it near Wuhan, and everybody's going to talk about the chocolate factory. Jon Stewart, it came from the chocolate factory. Come on, guys. There's an outbreak in Wuhan, and then there's a thing. Of course it came from the thing. That the CIA is brilliant, man. These guys are good. These guys are good. And it's bats and pangolins and raccoon dogs. Nothing you eat. Right? You're not thinking, oh, I better not go to El Pollo Loco this week because of the virus. Now you are. Now you are. I bet you don't eat eggs next week. I'm sticking with oatmeal, guys. I'm sticking with oatmeal.
Another dish. I know I'm throwing random data pieces in there, and none of them really fit so far. But I mean, the whole kind of trope, late 2020, early 2021, about Bill Gates becoming the single biggest private landowner in the United States. Could you tie that into any of this? I mean, I know it's the whole impossible meat, whatever cancer he's trying to kill everyone with, but
he wants to vaccinate the chickens, right? So to raise a roaster takes 40 days from hatch to slaughter to raise a roaster. So a chicken that you eat is a 40-day thing, and they vaccinate them. So in other words, you can't prevent these things from getting infected in the course of 40 days. No. So they have to vaccinate these chickens for a 40-day life cycle. And they do. And so I think Bill Gates is all in on vaccinating chickens. He wants to vaccinate the cows. He wants to put mRNA in the beef supply. I know people who are looking to find local ranchers that'll, butcher their meat for them because they're worried about mRNA in the beef supply. So I'm not, although I look like a conspiracy theorist, I'm just trying to not get killed, guys. I saw what happened to Dr. Jensen. I saw the ad hominem attacks, how they came after him and his license. And I anticipated it when I was doing the Vegas stuff. I knew they were going to come after me, my family, my kids. And so that's why I did this. I'm not really like a conspiracy theory guy. I'm a researcher. I'm a data analyst. I'm a quant.
Conspiracy theory is a term coined by the CIA. Don't let them.
Sure.
Don't cede any ground.
But meaning, I don't dig into all this crazy stuff. I just happen to want to know what's going on here because of the map.
I know, but don't cede any ground to them. It's critical thinking. Right. Don't let them poison the well. It's called critical thinking.
Thank you. So that's
and therefore you are a conspiracy theorist. Anyone who says I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but just admitted they're a conspiracy theorist, right? Exactly. They're about to present a conspiracy and say,
Have you been to Dealey Plaza? Have you been to Dealey Plaza?
I'm not saying I'm a conspiracy theorist, but
you are. Yeah, exactly.
$2.3 trillion, September 10th.
I actually get mad at people who use it pejoratively. They don't get it by me without a serious tongue lashing because I go, look, if you're so stupid you don't think men of wealth and power conspire, you're out of your gourd, right? You're completely. So the other thing about COVID, just general statements. To the extent there's bad guys out there who are doing this for bad reasons, I think they overplayed it. That is to say, it's possible they didn't, because it's possible. I have found looking at these problems, it's instructive to look at it through the lens of rising authoritarianism. Okay, so if you want to put a big umbrella and cover everything, you look at the history of rising authoritarian regimes, and this is what you see. To the extent that they want to demoralize us and confuse us, then maybe they played it perfectly. But to the extent they were trying to sort of fake us out, they overplayed it by a number of things. First of all, if I was trying to hide it a little better, I'd say, first of all, we should have let natural immunity count. They still would have gotten a lot of vaccines. The minute they said pregnant women should get vaccinated, they showed their hand.
Jumped the shark. Yep.
They absolutely. And the minute that heads of obstetric and pediatric societies said that the vaccines are safe, when the first COVID vaccine baby hadn't been born yet, was 5 months away, And I'm reminded of the thalidomide story, which we all know
Mhm.
why those statements are true. But the thalidomide was released in 59. It didn't show a signal until 61. It actually took about a year for them to say, wait a minute, these flippered kids all have a common theme here. And a flippered kid would not hide anywhere, right? You start seeing kids with flippers, you are going to say, wait a minute, what just happened, right? Now, here's the appalling part. So released in 59, this is mostly in Germany. Signal shows up in 61. It was pulled from the market in 69.
Yeah.
And you're going, how could that possibly be? So another great book. Again, Tommy's read every book, but John Abramson's Sickening is a great book because he's, unlike Kennedy, who hates Fauci with every bone in his body for reasons that I think we all agree. Abramson doesn't show that hatred bias, which I totally justify, but he just goes through the pharma world and how it has degenerated by virtue of pharma's take over the FDA and things like that. And it's really a must-read book, in my
Pharma
opinion.
by Gerald Posner, another one.
Yeah. And, I consulted for Pfizer for 20 years, was on Merck's long-range steering committee, which was 5 scientists globally. I didn't see the devil in there,
Yeah.
but
I'm
what
with you.
what I
can't buy that.
what I couldn't see though was clinical trials. So my overlap with those companies did not overlap with clinical trials, but I heard no rumors or anything in the process either. So I must say that it hit me a little like a truck when I found out how profoundly corrupt pharma and the FDA had become. That was surprising to me.
Yeah. I think that this disregard for if gain of function leads to an outbreak and n number of people die, that's acceptable. That's, I think, not acceptable to the rest of us. These bioethic decisions they're making are bizarre. But again, if you look at everything I've shown you guys in this session, the outbreak of H7N9, the avian influenza, it's well documented. So in other words, that happened. Think about how good these guys are covering this up. No one has talked about this. Dave said, he's part of this group, all these nobody's talking about H7N9 influenza anywhere. That's how good they are. We're 4 years. And guys, I've been focused on the influenza thing for 4 years like a maniac. This is my day job. This is all I do. I don't have grad students I have to deal with. I don't have patients I have to talk to. This is all I do all day long. And it took me 4 years to figure out it wasn't 1918 H1N1. It was 1917. And they both don't need trypsin. No wonder. By the way, Dr. Jensen, gas strep, all right, GAS, gas streptococcus, loves trypsin-free viruses. So in other, it's like a remora on a shark. The trypsin-free virus goes into the kidney, goes into the liver, goes into the spleen, and gas streptococcus follows because it doesn't need trypsin either. And this is the 1-2 punch. This is why the organs are failing. It's not the virus, it's the gas strep, and the gas strep is following it in. And this whole trypsin-free capability this is why I thought it was H1N1, because of the organ infections and the cytokine storms, and same thing with this virus. This virus has those same capabilities, and here comes sort of the dark, scary part. As if it wasn't dark and scary yet. Yeah.
90 minutes in, it's like, and now this is where it gets
here
bad.
It comes.
It's like,
and
wait,
now
what?
It gets dark.
Yeah.
Nobody has immunity. No one of us grew up with H7. You have something, our immunity to influenza is set on our first exposure. So if you're first exposed to H3N2, the rest of your life, that's going to be your primary immunity. If you're then exposed to PDM09 or something, H1N1, you'll have some immunity to it, but you'll have a rougher time. No one has ever been exposed to H7. We have no immunity to it.
But you said it's been out there since 13.
Okay, so children born in 2015 have some immunity. Yes. Yes. So 6-year-old kids. And by the way, I had this virus when I lived in Thailand. I had it in 2016. I did not have the highly pathogenic version. It still kicked my butt for 10 days, man. It was wicked. I didn't realize at the time that it was turning into something horrifying. But in 2016, living in Thailand, I got super sick, and it appears it was this. So now that you guys are aware of it, like you said, it's the green van syndrome. Now you're going to see avian influenza, and all the documents are there. It was the worst avian flu in European history, Australian history, Japanese history. This is what we were hiding. And the reason we're hiding it, Dave, is because it's ours. If we can pin it on something from Dr. Shi in Wuhan and say China did it, China did it. No, it's Wisconsin. Dr. Fauci funded it. Kawaoka built it. And that's how we had vote by mail. We had vote by mail because, nobody wanted to go to the schools to vote.
Interesting aside is, if you ever see that video of where NASA mission control, it's on YouTube. It's got like 100 million views of when they're losing contact with Columbia in 2003 as it's breaking up, and then you see them, they're trying to get it, and they're realizing it's like, oh, it's done. The head mission control guy goes, he turns to like security and he goes, lock all the doors. No one's allowed to leave, and it means you want to do a total forensic, gather everything, because this is the beginning of like a 10-year long invest. They're dead. Everything's going to be screwed. Basically freeze frame everything. We need all the data we can get. One thing I'm just trying to look at now is, we're looking retroactively at 2019, 2020 now, even just through doing this podcast and all the interviews with doctors. And I'm trying to look back at episodes I did and what I thought, and trying to, it's all clear in hindsight. When all the talking about disease X has really got me kind of trying to freeze and be like, what do I wish I looked for in 2020 and 2021? I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that. If you could go back, what would you be looking for so that you don't have to wait 4 years to look back? Like, what things are happening now that we are just, are we going to do a podcast in 2028 and be like, that tweet on March 5th? Like, there it is.
Dude, this is disease X.
Okay.
H7N9, highly pathogenic, has a case fatality ratio of 10 to 30%. This is disease X. This is what Dr. Redfield said the real pandemic was not COVID. The real pandemic is going to be an avian flu. It's already here. He's not predicting it. It's here. This is it.
We're head of the CDC for everybody listening.
Yeah, Dr. Redfield. And he said that the next big pandemic is going to be an avian flu. And again, you guys don't have to take my word for it. That's out there. And he's telling everybody, this COVID thing is not really here. You want, I can play it for you real quick. Here you go. Hang on. Dr. Redfield.
My understanding is Redfield kind of switched teams a little bit along the way.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah, I think he had, I think his conscience wasn't, listen to what he says. Listen to this.
The great pandemic is still in the future, and that's going to be a bird flu pandemic for man. It's going to have significant mortality in the 10 to 50% range. It's going to be trouble, and we should get prepared for it. I do believe that the pandemic risk is a greater risk of the national security of the United States than Korea, China, Russia, Iran.
But that could put him in the bad guy category, right? That could put him in the, the propaganda machine.
$1 trillion, yeah.
Yeah, we need even more, and you got to vaccinate again.
Yeah.
And
my thing with these guys, all these virus guys, they don't seem to predict things that aren't already underway. So
right.
So when he says the next thing is gonna be, I'm like, no, it's already here, man. I mean,
well, here's one for you. You've got this thing that may be unrelated, where Catherine Herridge, about a month ago, said she thinks in 2024 there's going to be a black swan event. Mm-hmm. And she's one of these Sunday morning round table, very prominent journalists, sort of the highest shelf. And then I'm watching. Oh, I think it was with a CIA guy, ex-CIA guy, who said she's one of the good guys.
General Flynn's
Then
brother said
next thing you
that.
know, she gets fired. Next thing you know, they've grabbed her computer and she's in a contempt of court charge. And you just got to wonder. It's unrelated, except for it could be that thing where you say, remember when Catherine got fired and had her computer grabbed? I wonder what she was working on.
General Flynn's brother said that on my show 2 years ago. He said 2024.
He said what? He said what?
2024 is going to be the Black Swan event.
The Deagle moment.
Yeah, I get. Yeah, I don't.
Well, again, I don't know about any of that stuff. I like Catherine Herridge. I think if these guys could get to me, they'd do the same thing. You know, if they knew where to find me, they'd pick up my computer, my hard drives. Guys, I'm sharing stuff they consider national security.
But I don't think you have. I don't know if you have the reach for them to care. I think I really do think that there's a lot of chatter below the radar that they tolerate. They just can't whack everybody who talks.
That's why I befriended the Delta Force guys very early on. I'm like, they don't want to kill me. They like me. They like my memes.
That's right.
Well, they'll just get a Navy SEAL team of some other flavor. And
as Dave and I have said in the past, I'm not asking you guys to endorse this or
I don't care, dude.
With it. I just want you to know what's been going on, see a bunch of stuff that you haven't seen before, and just sort of pull the lens back a bit and say, you know, there was another pandemic. It started a long time ago, and that's why eggs are $8 a dozen, and it's not gone. Yeah, it's still out there.
It's not nothing could be crazier off topic. It's the quote: 3 things cannot long be hidden: the sun, the moon, and the truth. It just is what it is. There's nothing wrong with critical thinking and examining facts. You just look at everything and go, that's what. There is no bias to things. It just is what it is. Here are all the data points. Don't get mad at me. It's just what they are. So no, I have no problem endorsing or hosting any of this shit. I don't care.
No,
it throws it on the table.
Yeah,
right.
That's it.
I hadn't heard it, so.
Well, and so the hypothesis, the conclusion that I've come to, is that the vaccines were not for SARS-CoV-2. The entire vaccine program was a cover-up, and that the vaccines were actually for H7N9. And you were simply told that they were for COVID. So that's the hypothesis. Does this material support that? Well, January 13th, when he signs the Moderna deal, there's one guy dead. And there's 4,000 dying a week from influenza. I don't believe these vaccines were for SARS-CoV-2 because Pfizer has already signed a thing in 2018. It's already done. And how the hell you bring a vaccine to market in less than a year? These guys are working on clinical trials for years already. I don't know. Now, again, this is uncomfortable. This is cognitive dissonance. That should be my middle name.
Well, it's not that crazy to the extent that, as I'm trying to remember where I most recently heard it, but when you develop a bioweapon, you develop the vaccine simultaneously.
Sword and Shield. That's from the Nazi program.
Yeah, and so it should not surprise anyone. What would surprise people is to find out that Fauci was running a bioweapons program.
Yeah.
And that's the part that I think probably they wrestle with. It probably shocks people to find out that there were 36 bioweapons programs in Ukraine, for example. There's probably a ton of people who don't realize that the Ukrainians killed one of our journalists. Our State Department did absolutely nothing about it. So the problem most people are facing, and I run into this daily, is that our Overton window is being pried open so frequently by so many strange things that you say, I just wouldn't have believed that 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And I think most people short circuit on it. If you haven't been wading into the shallow end of the pool to get to the deep end, I don't think you just can't get to the deep end. And so I'm reading about stuff that to me seems preposterous, except for the fact that the evidence of it being true is too compelling.
That's it.
But I wouldn't have been able to read it. So I read Bush Family Secrets years ago.
Russ Baker.
And I read it halfway and quit because I wasn't ready to believe that the Bush family was that bad.
Yeah.
And I knew I didn't like George Jr. It just seemed
House of Bush, House of Sod.
Yeah, you go back reading. Yeah, and then there's George Bush. There was another George Bush in Dallas on the day Kennedy was shot, and it was like
Crazy stuff.
Yeah, odd stuff. Yeah, no, it
So-
starts to pry it open, and you start to become a little more malleable to possible ideas.
Well, I also talked the other day, not long ago, to an immunologist, a professor,
Mhm.
and what I was shocked by was not that she disagreed with some of the ideas that are swirling in my head, because we could have a great discussion if this person could say, well, here's where you're wrong about that.
Mhm.
That would be fantastic. What I was shocked by is that this person wasn't aware of the issues at all. And I got to the end where they didn't know that the lab leak theory was a debate. They didn't know that ivermectin worked. They didn't was even possibly working. They didn't even. And she said, "Well, if it worked, why wouldn't my doctor prescribe it?" And I'm sitting there going, "Where do I start on that story?"
The
Right?
censorship.
And it was
complex
shocking to
is-
me because for an immunologist, this was Super Bowl Sunday, right? This was the
Yeah.
game.
Yes.
And so I was reading about immunology in 2019 purely on coincidence. And so, but when COVID showed up, it's just like, whoa, this is getting interesting now. And that's why my email box is filled in January with emails, because it became game day for me. I have an interesting anecdote that's worth paying attention to. One is I was watching a TED Talk by a woman who's giving polio virus vaccines in Africa for several dozen years, and she gave a TED Talk, and I remember wondering why this would be true. Where she said, "There's the live vaccine, and there's that's attenuated, and then there's the dead one." And she says you can tell what you got because the dead one requires a booster. And she says what we know is that the all-cause mortality rate for the live virus is way better. And she says these kids are not dying of polio, but they're dying less than the dead vaccine kids. And she was talking about it, waxing enthusiastically about how the live vaccine was imparting some sort of special immunological properties to the kids, causing them to resist other ailments, like whatever it is that kills kids in Africa. And then it clicked shockingly late in this whole debate is that no, the dead vaccine was corrupting their immune system and they were dying at a higher rate. And she didn't realize the vaccine was actually, the dead one was causing kids' immune systems to break down. And it just, when they just clicked, I said, oh, she's got it backwards. She's got causality backwards. And I think she was honest. I think she really believed what she was saying. But I wonder what she's thinking these days. I have a couple of questions if Scott's there still. Yeah, I see him there. What is the current conventional thinking on what will happen to fully vaccinated people? Is there a time-dependent decrease in risk of something bad happening, meaning if you've made it this far, you're okay? Or are we all ticking time bombs waiting for that moment where something rips us up, where some asymptomatic myocarditis takes us down? What's the current thinking on that? I think Scott's distracted. Oh, there he is.
Yeah, say that again, please.
What's the current thinking on the risk to fully vaccinated people from this point going forward? Does the passage of time make you less and less at risk? Or is the belief that there's a ticking time bomb that there's no way to know if all of a sudden you're going to just keel over from something?
Okay, I think you're talking about the pathogenicity of the spike protein itself, which continues to be
which
potentially
may be
manufactured.
into your DNA, right? Which may be potentially in your DNA. What's the current thinking on that?
Current thinking is that definitely with the passage of time, you become less and less likely to have one of these tragic, catastrophic events. I do think also, though, that right now there's data out there that indicate that the more boosters you've had, the greater likelihood that if you contract COVID, that you will potentially be hospitalized than if you had natural.
And that's non-linear too, right? So one is not a big problem at all. 2 is not very much, and then 3 all of a sudden sort of starts to really soar. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I think the concern is that perhaps the people that would have gotten the most boosters would have been the people that have the most comorbidities. And so that there's some
Bias.
rationale there. And I
Right.
understand that as well.
But I also think it's just believers, right? Or, I've been triply jabbed, and the choice was give up your job on a theory that you're at risk. And in this doctor Zoom group, I had to already, because I was not going to give up primary breadwinner status on some theory of which it could be one of many that I was not right about. And then it did nothing to me. And so then Cornell said, you got to get another jab. And they're saying, you can't do it. And I go, the problem is I'm still here after 2. And now you're telling me to quit my job to get a third, right? So there's kind of this odd paradox. So I got it. So I'm lurking here, and I feel no effects, although I've wondered if things that are going wrong in old age might be accelerated, right? I'm wondering if I'm aching more. I'm wondering if that sort of thing. You get kind of hypochondriac-like. So I did a poll on Twitter, which is very scientific. And I asked the question, do you have ailments that you hadn't really thought much about, but you realize as you ponder this poll, it seemed to have picked up in the last year or two, right? And so you can imagine someone say, yeah, I've got the sniffles all the time, or yeah, I ache all the time, or yeah, my urinary flow sucks all of a sudden. You can imagine all cause whatever problems. And I got a 25% yes on that poll. And that struck me as interesting, because it's kind of a low-level all-cause morbidity argument where you say maybe you're getting more arthritic, maybe you're getting, right? All these things seemingly within the realm of possibility.
I think you make a really good point there. I would say this: there's all kinds of things that have occurred over the last 4 years that are confounding. I mean, it's really probably not so surprising that the government used money to, if you will, accomplish their means, what they wanted to accomplish. But I think it's clear that the power of suggestion can so slant and bias what we're looking at that we have to look at things that are outside of the power of suggestion. So long COVID is not going to be very, very helpful for us, because we have the same kind of problem after an Epstein-Barr virus infection as well, like mono. But I think that's why we have gravitated towards all-cause mortality and excess deaths.
Right.
Excess deaths, you can't really mess around with them. So I think when
they're pretty unambiguous.
When you have 2.9 million deaths per year prior to COVID, and then in that first year of COVID, it jumps up to 3.3 and a little more. And then the vaccine, which is supposed to be, the Hail Mary pass that gets caught. It's supposed to be the game changer. And it doesn't. The all-cause, the excess deaths don't go back down towards the 2019 level. They continue to rise. To me, that's one of the most compelling pieces of data that we can take away from this whole COVID pandemic, is that our government, our CDC, our departments of health told us this vaccine is going to take care of things, and it didn't. And I think the fact that we still have this denialism, and we have people saying that because I'm not buying what they're selling, that I'm some sort of reckless disinformation kind of person. I'm saying, seriously? I mean, this doesn't even make any sense at all. So, when I hang my hat on one thing, it's the fact that the vaccine does not stop transmission, does not stop hospitalization, does not stop death. And the fact is, it did not even stop our increase in excess mortality. And to me, that's what so many Americans are reacting to. And I even think in this election, I think at some level, you're going to see a certain number of people who cast their vote on one issue and one issue alone. And that's they want to give the big FU to the government. They're giving them the bird. They're saying, we don't trust you. You've done nothing to make us trust you. And you keep telling us now, even just recently, come out and get another booster. Virtually in the same month, they're telling us, oh, by the way, the 5-day quarantine, don't worry about it. If you're a day without fever and you're getting better, get back to work. I mean, you can't make this up.
And the children.
Yeah.
And the children. The
6
children.
months old. 6 months old.
The children have never been justifiably vaccinated. Now, supposedly it's on the vaccination list, which the other thing, the reason I'm a total anti-vaxxer at this point, not necessarily, if I had a newborn, I know what I would do. First and foremost, I would delay all the vaccines. I'd spread them out as much as I could. For years, I have thought that we were invading the immune system way too aggressively. You generate an immune response of 30 things at one time. A newborn shouldn't be subjected to that. So I thought that was wrong. But I now realize, like, for example, the Kennedy argument about autism, there's a spike at a certain age bracket that's around 18 months. I am a believer in the autism connection now. I didn't believe it before at all. I thought we dealt with it. The autism problem are the cases of rapid onset where you get the vaccine. That night you get sick, the next day the kid's gone. I don't need to see too many of those before I say that's a correlation. I don't need a massive clinical trial. You do that to 5 kids and they're gone. I'm taking that as we should not do that. It goes away after about 2 years, that spike. And so there's things you can do to protect yourself without going totally anti-vax. I'm anti-vax now because I'm not sure the flu vaccines aren't already mRNA vaccines without them telling you. And I don't think you'll ever know.
I just showed you the Pfizer contract from 2018.
Right. But if you go get a flu vaccine right now, people think they're getting a generic flu vaccine, and there's no way to know. That's the problem. There is no way to know.
That's true.
Well, it does bring, I think sometimes people think, well, the government wouldn't do something horrific. And I think, if you go back to, all people need to do is go back to the Cutter incident in 1955 with the polio vaccine. Go back to 1976 and look at the fact that some 50 people died and there are a couple hundred cases of Guillain-Barré, and that program was suspended and never restarted. And here we sit, we have the CDC telling us that literally within the first 48 hours after receiving the COVID vaccine, some 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 people died within 40 hours. Let me tell you, as a practicing physician, I don't give vaccines, whether it's to tetanus or diphtheria or anything else, to a person who's sick. If someone comes in and they've got a fever of 102 or they got a cough, I'll tell them, come back in a few weeks if you want. But this notion that thousands and thousands of people die within 48 hours of getting this vaccine and nobody's making a big deal out of it, and I'm being criticized as being reckless, this is, I can forgive a lot of things. I can recognize that we have different opinions, but I'll have a hell of a time getting over this the rest of my life, that I had colleagues criticize me because I was so alarmed by people dying within 48 hours of receiving this vaccine. These were people that were previously healthy.
Well, there's also the problem, and I don't know, you never know who to believe. This is a problem that increasingly is problematic, where when you learn something, you don't know what's a fact and what's not at this point. But if you believe the crowdsourced digging into the Pfizer clinical study, one of the most telling things, besides the all-cause mortality rate of the vaccine group being 3 times that of the control group, I think the actual smoking gun in that story is, so if you imagine the clinical trial where you have 20,000 people are going to get the real one, 20,000 going to get the control, what are you going to do? This is the most important vaccine program in the history of mankind. And what are you going to do? Well, first of all, you're going to get name, address, phone number, email, next of kin, phone number, email, you name it. You are going to probably say, okay, I'll tell you what, we're going to give you the vaccine. We're going to do, blood work every 2 weeks, right? You're going to do all sorts of things to make sure that these people are doing okay. What turns out to be the smoking gun for me is that if you're to ask how, in the modern digital era, how many of those 40,000 people would you lose track of? Now, let me tell you this. I'm on a campus with 40,000 people. We don't lose track of anybody, right? If we don't all of a sudden go, oh, where'd those students go, right?
Student ID,
and yeah, right. We know how to reach their family if they're not showing up, right? And these people who step forward were the ones who are saying, I'm going to take one for the team. And therefore, the ones who are dedicated to the trial, they were shown to be healthy, because you're not going to vaccinate a person who's going to die on you the next day anyways. Supposedly, 3,000 disappeared. And you're going, I wonder where they went. Hiking in the Ozark. I don't know where they went down to Columbia or something. What happened to those 3,000? I might be off by a factor. It was either 1,500, 3,000. My brain doesn't work because I had the vaccine. But that shows you how criminal that clinical trial was. What a lot of people don't know is that all clinical trials are done sort of offsite of pharma. They're done by companies whose names you don't know. They're companies who, if they blow something, they just wrap it up and then start a new company. And they know that to get the next gig at Pfizer, they better come up with good numbers. And then Pfizer say, oh, we should go with these guys because they know how to make the numbers come out well. They know how to make it work. Yeah. And so that's what comes out of Abramson's book pretty clearly, is the idea that the clinical trials are the equivalent of bond rating agencies on Wall Street. They get paid to come up with the right numbers.
I interviewed Brooke Jackson, who is the whistleblower on the Pfizer trial, and she came on the podcast, and she said that they accidentally unplugged one of the refrigerators during the clinical trial, and the product is supposed to be kept at -70 Celsius.
Right.
And she said they accidentally unplugged the fridge. The maintenance team did at night, mopping the floor, and they don't know how long the fridge was unplugged. And they still gave those products to people participating in the trial. So you're supposed to maintain it at 70 degrees below Celsius. It's like leaving mayonnaise out overnight. You wouldn't serve that to your guests on Super Bowl Sunday. Left the mayonnaise out overnight. And they unplugged the fridge, and they were still given doses of this, according to Brooke Jackson. So,
well, the other interesting thing, and as a chemist, this really hit me like a truck, was that if you handle nucleosides, polynucleosides, they're fragile as hell. So if you took genetics or something and you're pipetting them and stuff, you've got to be gentle, or you will shred the molecules. And if you want to break up DNA, you just put it in a blender and it'll fry it. And then you're making vaccines for over 1 billion people. And so you're going to be making them in batches. And these are oil and water mixtures. This is like oil and vinegar salad dressing. But they're saying, but you can't vigorously stir it. And so now you've got the greasy cytotoxic nanoparticle, and you've got the saline solution of potentially the polynucleoside. And so where from that vat your vaccine comes from could have a huge effect on whether you got basically a placebo or not. That one hit me. I had about a 2-hour discussion with Ryan Cole one day, and as soon as he said that, I go, oh my God, it just completely fried me right on the spot, because I knew that to be true.
I've had on Dr. Aditi Bhargava a couple times, once with Dr. Malone, I think once with Dr. McCullough. She's the head of mRNA research at UCSF Medical School. And she actually helped the Biden campaign. And I bring that up because it's not just that she's someone who also doesn't like Biden. She said, I was on the campaign with him, and I cannot now justify his words saying, yeah, this is a pandemic to the unvaccinated. And furthermore, she went on to talk about, the distribution of the nanolipid particles, just about the very batch you got. Did you get one that was settling on the bottom? Did you get one that was from the stuff at top? And she thinks that's entirely what's responsible for some people dropping dead in 30 seconds and other people being fine. And
there's also, I saw evidence that there was the batch dependence showed sort of a time dependence. And it seemed to suggest that maybe these guys were diddling with the formula and then sort of standing back and watching, and then diddling with it some more and standing back and watching, so that the vaccine was not necessarily the same month to month to month, that they were experimenting in real time.
That's documented.
Okay.
So we have paperwork from the FDA that shows that Pfizer had 2 different formulations. The first formulation required the -70 degrees centigrade storage. Because of the issues, they then reformulated it with something called tromethamine. And tromethamine is a buffer that I think is made out of sucrose. And because of that, it doesn't need to be stored at -70. So there was a new formulation, and I have the paperwork on that. So that is well documented. And then that trimethamine is also known as Tris, and they put that.
Oh, Tris, yeah, I know Tris. Okay,
and they put that in the pediatric version as well. So both the pediatric version has Tris, and they changed the formulation of the main product, which means the EUA was granted for which formulation? And speaking of EUA, the EUA simply states that the product, the inoculation, will prevent the disease. That's it. It says nothing about hospitalizations. It says nothing about death. It says nothing about spread. It says we're granting the EUA because it appears that this product may prevent the disease. And as Dr. Jensen said, once it became apparent that it does not prevent the disease, why did we still have an EUA? And why haven't any of these big shot attorneys on Twitter? Guy, all you have to do is file an injunction or something? 21 U.S. Code 360 BBB. It says we're granting you this because it appears the product will prevent the disease we call COVID. Well, as soon as Joe Biden got COVID, and as soon as Kamala Harris got COVID, and as soon as Fauci got COVID, and Jill Biden got COVID, and Secretary Becerra, he got it twice. Well, at that point, it said, I think it's pretty safe to say it does not prevent the disease we call COVID. Well, then why?
Well, my doctor's Zoom group has lawyers. Some of these guys.
Why do we still have an EUA? So ask them, why is there still an EUA in place if the inoculations do not prevent the disease? That's what it says it needs to do.
Unless it was
well, so these lawyers are not fighting that fight. That's not the fight they're fighting. These lawyers are fighting.
Why are they not fighting the fight? You could get these vaccines off the market tomorrow with an injunction.
That for the lawyers, that's not where the money is.
Right. So isn't that a problem, right?
Well, yes and no. I believe that lawyers should be probably trying to earn a living too. The lawyers are the guys who are suing Pfizer and suing various employers. And these are serious. These are some of the biggest lawsuits in the country right now. And there's something like 30,000 lawsuits right now, and the dominoes are slowly but surely beginning to fall. But it's about damage of the vaccinated people, damage of the fired people, and that's where the money is.
I'm talking about getting the vaccines off the market in one.
There's no money in it. There's no money in it.
Right, but doing the right thing would be nice. If there was some really wealthy attorney out there that didn't really need another 100 million.
Well, but if dominoes start falling, then the vaccines will come off the market too.
But again, if it becomes injunction against the EUA, we get rid of Moderna, Pfizer, all in one fell swoop. Boom, they're gone. There is no EUA anymore. They don't prevent the disease, and accordingly,
unless of course your hypothesis it's not for the disease we call COVID.
Well, that's a whole nother Well, then we know it doesn't.
Yeah, some Pentagon general pulls you aside and goes, "Yeah, it doesn't stop COVID, but it does stop."
Exactly.
Yeah, crimson.
I can't thank you guys enough for considering this information and humoring me and allowing me to share my mea culpa with you that it was not 1918 H1. Apparently, it looks like it was. And if you don't believe me, guys, ask any chicken farmers. You might know what's going on with the chicken coops.
Ironically enough, I do have some contacts in poultry.
There you go.
Ironically enough, I do. I'm just glad Dave's alive.
Me too.
I'm just glad Dave's alive. Not from the vax. I just mean, he normally responds, and he wouldn't miss those other episodes.
I was supposed to be on last week, I ghosted him.
Yeah, yeah. John was like, "Is Dave going to join us?" I'm like, Dave didn't respond to the Luongo Kunstler episode.
Oh, jeez.
He might as well be dead because he never misses.
Wasn't intentional. I had another I learned on another podcast that I was supposed to be on another podcast.
That was a vaccine injury. You blacked out for 3 days.
Double book. Well, Dr. Jensen, thank you for joining this crew and sharing your experiences with us again. I'm so grateful to you guys, to all three of you.
I've
Thank you,
another
John. Thank
question.
you.
Let me ask another question or two. When Obama shut down the gain of function, did he tell it to go offshore, or did they go offshore behind his back? Do you think?
What's the difference?
This is gonna.
Obama went.
Actually, there's a difference to the extent that it influences your view of what Obama tried to do.
All right.
I'd like to give him credit if he tried to deal with it.
Obama went to Ukraine with Dick Lugar in 2005. Obama is the father of offshoring. So there's the Dick Lugar Research Center is in Tbilisi, Georgia, and that's a bioweapons research facility that they'll tell you is really for Flintstone vitamins. And that's in Tbilisi, Georgia. That's the Dick Lugar Research Center, named after Dick Lugar. And Dick Lugar brought Barack Obama to Ukraine in 2005, and their plane was boarded by the Russians. And the Russians took Dick Lugar and Barack Obama into custody in 2005. And it became an international thing. This is when he was a young senator. I think he was first-term senator. Right, so 2005, the Russians take Dick Lugar and Obama into custody. They release him a few hours later, and they continue to Ukraine. I'm the one, Dave, that went to the U.S. Embassy website and found the documents showing Department of Defense investment in Ukraine biolabs on Friday, the 25th of February, the day that Russia invaded. Our embassy was deleting the documents. So
you are so on the spectrum. You are so on the spectrum.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I think that's a
So as I clicked on each one of the labs, I was getting a 405 or 404 error that the docs weren't there. The link was dead.
That's
So
awesome.
I went to archive.org, the time machine, and I put in the link and I said, so show me what was here 10 days ago. Yahtzee. And I get all the documents showing the Department of Defense investing in labs in Ukraine. So I'm the guy. So when Marco Rubio said to
Newland,
to Victoria, do or don't we, I had already broadcast that Friday night. So she knew.
Were you surprised she fessed up? Were you surprised?
No, because I showed it Friday night. We had thousands of viewers Friday night saw this live, and I'm showing the documents on YouTube live Friday night. I'm sure Marco Rubio's team had that video. They had that. They know that we had the documents.
By the way, from that exchange, you could see that Rubio is as dirty as anyone, too.
Yeah, he knows. Yeah. I'm telling you, they all know this. Everything Rand Paul says is a charade. Everything Senator Ron Johnson says is a charade. They know.
Really? Are you sure about that one? You sure about that one?
They know all about Crimson Contagion.
Well, they might know about that, but Johnson, God, he seems like he's trying to get it out there.
No, it's a charade.
In a Zoom call with him, he just seems so sincere about what you could actually
ask him about me. Ask him about Beijing, Shanghai. What about the number one comorbidity? Why does he avoid my research?
But Johnson's very realistic about what he can expect to achieve and not achieve.
All right.
And so I think he's kind of picking his battles.
Well, I'm sure he is, and he's avoiding the gorilla in the room, which yeah. So that's why I'm suspicious of him. And in a couple weeks, there's going to be a whole new set of developments that's really going to force his hand and Rand Paul's hand. They're not going to be able to hide much longer.
Now, the other explanation for why this might not be getting talked about, and I see this a lot, is that you do have to pick your fights. So if you pick a fight that takes people outside their Overton window, then you lose your listeners. And so if you have as your goal to achieve X and Y, if you go off into the weeds on Z, you defeat the purpose that you set out to achieve. So you really do have to. One time, Glenn Greenwald was asked about a very dicey theory out there that I'm not even going to mention just to keep it from getting weird. And he said, I have to pick my fights. And that's exactly what he was saying. He said, I can't go into every fight because it will simply be counterproductive. And that's where I think someone like Johnson, he has not convinced me that he in any way, shape, or form is one of the bad guys.
I'm not saying he's a bad guy.
Well, if he's hiding shit, you could argue.
I think he knows that COVID is a cover-up for Crimson Contagion. There's
Okay.
no one in the Senate that doesn't know about Crimson Contagion. And when Rand Paul pretends he doesn't know who Bob Cadlick is, he's the Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response. He's the single person in the government responsible for pandemics, for pandemic preparedness. So they're just, I feel like I'm watching WWE wrestling, you know, and I'm watching The Rock and Hulk Hogan like it's a show. And the people in the Senate are playing a role, and nobody's talking about the chickens. It's all about the chickens, guys. It's all about the chickens. The chickens are the evidence. There's 54 million dead chickens. There's no escaping this. There's no escaping the worst avian influenza outbreak in human history. And oh, by the way, the flu disappeared during COVID? Come on. That's absurd. Of course it didn't. So that's all I've got, guys.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say, and for that, we got to put a pin in it there. I've already pushed my show back 30 minutes. I don't want to be a total ass and be a no show. But that being said, would happily do it again. Would love to have you guys on again. Dr. Jensen, thank you for coming on my show. I don't know if this is a good or a bad first impression, but it is what it is, and you know, take from it what you will. We covered asteroids and NORAD, and I interjected NORAD several times, which is a common theme on my show, for better or worse. And but yeah, thank you so much for coming on here. And obviously, Dave
Thank
and
you
John,
very much.
thank you, sir.
It was good to meet you, by the way. It was good to meet you.
Yes,
Same
sir.
here. I
Thank you.
appreciate it very much. John, always good to see you.
Same here, guys. I'm so grateful that you take the time to hear this out. It means a lot.
Absolutely, and dude, I'd love to have you guys on again. This is a fun little powwow. It's my only recurring group of four is Luongo, Collum, and Kunstler, and that is a very unholy group. So you know, this maybe is a little more of a holy group. But I'd love to do it again. I sent you guys the link, but I'll send it again. John, thank you for your presentation. Thank you for doing my job. You took over and did the job. That was great. It was fantastic. I got to sit in the back seat, which is always enjoyable.
Sorry.
And no, I'm not saying that sarcastically. I love when people take over and I don't have to do shit. It's great. But yeah, thank you so much. And guys, please go into the description. You can go find their Twitters. I'm banned from Twitter, but I think these three are on Twitter. And John, let's do another one. Let's put together another one. Sound good?
Adios, sir.
Colin, thank you so much, buddy. I'm glad
Thank
you're
you, guys.
alive. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching. God bless everybody. Much love. Peace. And for those of you still watching, again, I am pushing to sponsor American Hartford Gold. They are sponsoring the show to a considerable degree. If you like this show, if you like the kind of freewheeling episodes that can go from Crimson Contagion to the episode in 3 minutes is going to be about suicide. Tomorrow is going to be about, New York City mob bosses. Thursday is going to be about Blackwater mercenaries and everything in between. If you guys like it, maybe you don't agree with everything I say, but you do like the fact that everything's on the table, and that you can come on here and make your argument. Support the show. Go to American Hartford Gold. Use promo code Tommy. Again, you do have a chance to win $5,000 of silver, which, again, if you look at the camera, geez, this really is heavy. This is 1,000 ounces, not 1,000. This is 100 ounces of silver. And by the way, this is mine from before they were my sponsor. So I do mean what I say when I say I invest in bullion, because I really don't trust anything else. This is 100 ounces. I think $5,000 is like 150 ounces. So here's another 100 ounce. I mean, you can absolutely, kill someone with these. And, in a post-apocalyptic society, you're going to want shiny metals. You that is going to be the currency for, you're a wizard. You're a magician. You have access to the shiny metals. And, that could be the difference between you being a slave and you being a local warlord, perhaps smiled upon as a chieftain or an oracle of sorts. I don't necessarily condone investing in the military-industrial complex, but there's 500 ounces of silver in the nose cone of every cruise missile. So, I mean, am I happy that World War III is coming? No. But you know, in a way, you can kind of invest in the military-industrial complex without blatantly investing in it, like buying stock. You could buy bullion and be like, oh, I'm supporting Tommy's podcast, but you know, every cruise missile you see streaking over the border to Russia or Taiwan or you know, Gaza, you know, you look at your wife and you go, hey, honey, that's good for us. You know, I'm just trying to make a silver lining, if you will, to a dark cloud. So go to American Heart for Gold. Again, they might not be my sponsor anymore, as I'm talking about World War III and bludgeoning people to death. So, you know, I might just be walking a tightrope with them. But regardless, you know, what's cool is regardless if they're my sponsor or not, I do mean what I say. I do invest in bullion. I read G. Edward Griffin's Creature from Jekyll Island in 2021, and to me, it's just it's a place to put my money that's not as volatile as the stock market. And I am paranoid. I do like to hold it. I like to know that it's me in my apartment with a loaded gun and my money in the form of a brick. So, you know, that's that. And also, it's just shiny. I mean, you know, you don't even need all this justification about free speech and sponsors. How about this? It's shiny. Yeah, it's shiny. Who doesn't like shiny stuff? Vampires. That's who. Don't be a vampire. Well, that's my pitch. Go to American Heart for Gold. That link is in the description. Use promo code Tommy. You get a chance at winning $5,000 of silver. Or you can buy gold. I don't know. Platinum, whatever you want. It's all shiny. It's all bullion. And it's probably all going to be a lot more valuable in light of World War III. Peace.